You are currently listening to the weekly broadcast about trying to save the world. We are beginning our adventure not only discovering the world we live in, but answering questions the world is asking, like, is the world heating up? And what can we do about it? Even more importantly, we will be dealing with these issues from the perspective that Hamilton is the center of the world. The effects of our warming planet can be felt even locally, and it is an important issue for all of us. And together, we can do something about it. Hello, this is Global Warning hosted by Stuart Schofield. You are listening to Free FM 89.0 Independent Community Media. The song you were just listening to was IGY, written by Donald Fagen. It's a great number musically and emotionally, and I love the central message. What a beautiful world this could be. Throughout all of human history, there has never been a better time to be alive, but it could also be a beautiful world. Today, we will be listening to a pre-recorded broadcast with Mr. Gordon Chesterman and Mr. Gary Schofield, both of whom are experts in their fields and are here to discuss global warming. This interview will be divided into 3 sections, one airing each week, and the first part starts now. We have here today Mr. Gordon Chesterman, who was, up until 2 years ago, serving as deputy mayor and 12 years on the Hamilton Council. Before then, he was a journalist on the board at Wintec and owned his own business. He has also had a media consultancy, was associate news editor for the Waikato Times, launched a newspaper in Fiji, won many journalistic awards, and it is my honor to have him on the show today for a debate. Also with us is Mr. Gary Schofield. He has worked for 30 years in Washington, D.C., is a biochemist, and is president of the Global Concern Incorporated, an organization dedicated to solutions for global warming. Both of my guests have received the honor of being recipients of the New Zealand Order of Merit for their work. Now, today's topic is that of global warming. So I will ask each of you a question. Is it for real? And what is each of yours stance on global warming?
Good morning, Stuart. You can put me down as a skeptic. And the reason I say that is, as a former public relations consultant, I have a great suspicion about things like Y2000, the avian bird flu. These are things that have become global issues, controversial, that have required millions and millions of dollars to be prepared for Y2000, which was planes falling out of the sky, and avian bird flu, where you and I would die in our beds overnight because of this terrible Asian hen sickness. And the only people to benefit out of those, in the case of Y2000, were the accountants who had to do a check of all your systems, the IT people. The second thing is, in terms of avian bird flu, the real winners there were the chemical companies providing the doses of medicine to cater for the whole of Hamilton coming into Asian bird flu. And look, that was a few years ago, but I would bet you good money that there are still supplies of the Asian bird flu vaccine sitting up at the Waikato Hospital today as we speak. So skeptic is the word.
Very good to have you here, Gordon. Good to see you. And skeptic is the right word, because that is the secret to science. Science is built on skepticism. So, and very good that you've brought up to be forewarned and armed about all the scams and who benefits and how, because that's how we should think. So if we view global warming, we could also view it in the same lens that you view it, which is enlightened, skeptical. So skeptical is the way science works. For there to be a science proof or a science reality or a science determination, skeptical scientists peer review other scientists. So they have data that skeptically looks at what these claims are. So yes, we could provide the same model and look at who would benefit. Just say, for example, that there was global warming. Would scientists benefit? Maybe. Would petroleum companies benefit for that not to be put forward as factual? Very likely. So you have swaths of people that benefit and swaths that don't. But the reality is, what does the data say? So I think that's where we have
And look, this is where you've got it over me in terms of
the facts.
In terms of being an expert in this area compared to my complete lack of knowledge. I mean, my issue with global warming is that I wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning and decide to get out of bed and think, gee, it's cold today, I'll put a sweater on.
Exactly.
Or
exactly.
I'm getting out of bed today, or the sun's out, what a lovely sunny day. And I just happen to think in very simple terms. We have the seasons. You know, we have the autumn when the leaves fall off the trees and block the drains. We have the summer when we can go swimming. We have the spring that leads up to going swimming. And then we have the winter where it's raining all the time. There's fog in Hamilton, yes. And you'd rather stay in bed. So I don't look at the science of that. It's like my car. I was thinking this morning driving over to the studio. Mm-hmm. I'm one of those people that I'm not interested in what's under the car hood. I'm only interested in getting in the car and turning the key on. Yeah. Now, if the car goes, fantastic. I've got a stressless day. But if it doesn't go, then the first thing I do is call the AA, who probably find my battery's flat. So I have very simple thoughts about global warming. It's one of those subjects I've put to the side, yes, because it's like if I said, let's talk about fluoride today. Is fluoride good or bad? And I've been in this debate several times in the city, and those that think that fluoride is killing everyone, they have facts this long, Googled facts that go back 50 or 60 years. Yeah. And then there's the science, and the science people are reluctant to do the definitive tests. And even if they did the definitive tests, those that oppose fluoride would absolutely disagree because they'd find a flaw in the research process. So I kind of steer clear of such a big subject like global warming.
And perhaps that is why more people like your learned self are not on board with the understanding of the warming of our planet, because they do feel like they wake up, it's warm, it's in the winter, it's cold. They're looking at weather instead of climate. So when you get over thousands of years, or in the Earth's case, over millions of years of relatively stable climate, and then you get an increase in climate on a global scale, increase in temperature of the Earth, then it's time to be cautious and worried. And I agree, when it comes to issues like what should we be concerned about? If we're in Syria at the moment and we're worrying about whether our children were going to be blown to bits tomorrow, we wouldn't be worried about climate change. That wouldn't be a priority. We have in the West, in our country, and in New Zealand here, we have the luxury to be worried about climate change because we're not, the other prescient issues that afflict us are not life and death struggles or of security struggles. So I sympathize with your perspective. And again, countries that, as we have, that have burnt countless volumes and tons of countless millions of tons of carbon dioxide, trillions of tons poured into the atmosphere. This is done from our industrial Western might. The developing nations and their concerns about climate change, or perhaps their concerns about security and whether they'll be alive tomorrow, they haven't had an option as yet to add their carbon footprint to the world. So should we prevent them from developing?
See, I think
those sort of issues.
But there's another argument here, and that is about the environment. And, for example, I am concerned about the environment, yes, about the South American countries ripping down their trees and burning them and clearing land. I drive a diesel car, and I love it. And I look at the debate around electric cars. Mm-hmm. So this is probably about the climate debate, but to me it's about an environmental debate. Yes. My car is a very modern English car, a Jaguar, and they are required to define the emissions. unlike the Volkswagen, which they put in a system to avoid a proper emission control. So my car has emission control. But to be frank, I don't think one jot about that. What I think about is when I go down to the gas station and my car takes 70 litres, it might take 80. I watch the dial go round, and I know that on a good day I might be paying $1.90 or $2 a litre right now for diesel, and then I look at what other people are paying for petrol, and that's, nearly $3. So I think, well, from my personal perspective, I don't have a problem with driving a diesel car. But just this morning on the news, in terms of Tesla 3, the electric car, they haven't even got it effectively up and running on the road. Yes, it has been run, but they're having huge difficulties producing it. And then secondly, they've got a huge backlog of cash needs. Billions of dollars are required, and I think shareholders are at a point where they're going to be deciding, is electrification of cars the way we need to go. Now, Jaguar next year are producing an electric version of my car, and I'll have a look at it. But if I drive down to Wellington, I get my 300 Ks, I've got to stop and spend overnight to plug in somewhere to rejuice the car. Now, how convenient is that? And it's a bit like the rail debate, and I know I'm talking around in circles here, but to go from Hamilton to Auckland by train, great idea.
You're covering a lot of ground.
Yeah,
put it that way.
It makes sense. But what doesn't make sense to me is that you've got to firstly drive down to the train station, get on the train, and then you're going to get dumped off, I think,
Absolutely.
at Papakura.
It has to be practical.
And then you have to get another train and go into Britmart or wherever the centre is, and then you've got to get a cab to go to wherever your meeting is. Now, I don't think that's practical.
It has to be.
No,
practical.
it has to be practical.
I'm happy for a trial on that. I'm happy to trial it.
So, you've said that you're a skeptic on climate change and global warming. What do you believe it would take to convince people of climate change, to emphatically
Convince them.
Convince people. Yes.
What do you think?
What would it take to convince
Well,
someone
I think it
of
has
climate
to
change?
relate to someone like me that doesn't think about it or worry about it. It's got to relate to me on a practical term. It's a bit like my Jaguar running on diesel. Now, again, that's a separate argument. But I would need to be convinced that running a diesel car is a really, really bad thing. I look at the price points, and yes, while I pay a road user tax of, I think, 6 cents a litre, every time I do 10,000 kilometres, I've got to go down to the post office or online and pay about $600. So that takes my $1.90 or whatever up to $2 and a bit. But it's still a good 50 cents cheaper for a very big car. I mean, this is a large car.
Would it interest you to know that most of the carbon dioxide that we add to our planet, to our thin veneer of an atmosphere, is actually from power plants? So rather than just transportation. So in fact, you make excellent points. But the overall amount of alteration to our atmosphere, which we all think of, and by the way, I understand exactly where you're coming from, because you wake up in the morning and it's cold or it's hot, you look out the window, you see an endless blue sky. It looks like a volume that will last forever, but in
There's
fact,
no danger. There's no danger, and that's part of the way.
Well, also
that,
there's no danger, but it's a thin veneer. What we think of as our world is not the way we think of it. We don't realize that the atmosphere didn't come with the planet. The atmosphere was created by life. The oxygen that we breathe came from early plants that were actually produced oxygen. We can now measure scientifically a decrease in the oxygen in our planet. We think of our planet as being the Earth. We go to work and we drive down to Wellington and all that, but in fact we're living on an ocean world. The largest part of this is the ocean. So
you talk
how
about
we
the
affect
ocean.
in the ocean is even more important than how much we affect our thin veneer of
But
an
let's
atmosphere.
talk about the ocean for a moment. I'm
Certainly.
going to mention Fiji.
Good idea. You're
Right.
an expert on it.
Yes, I lived in Fiji,
Yes.
and I love Fiji. But Fiji is an island surrounded by water,
Yes.
as is the definition of an island.
Yes.
And I think their biggest problem is getting rid of the waste, the rubbish, the garbage, the plastic bottles.
Certainly.
That is a number one priority in all of those islands. Otherwise, what happens is that waste, China doesn't want the plastic anymore. Well, who does? And so my concern for Fiji is more in the environmental sense. Yes, they need the coconut trees, and from the coconut trees come the coconuts, and from the coconuts come a range of very useful products. In fact, we've got a very good little business out at Raglan, not me, but out at Raglan, called Raglan Yogurt, and they make wonderful coconut yogurt. And I guess the coconuts come from the Pacific somewhere. Yeah. But that would be, in my view, the biggest issue facing Fiji. In terms of the global climate issue.
Also, what about the, and I know this is a topic that everybody talks to when they talk about islands in the Pacific, so excuse my adding this. When you have an increase in, because of the melting glaciers and because
Greenland
so you have an increase in sea volume and ocean volume and sea levels rise. That has to be an issue in the Pacific as well.
Yeah, I think some 8 islands have been completely covered up by oceans.
Yes.
Like eight islands in Micronesia and the Solomon Islands, somewhere in there.
But look, I will give you that because I have mentioned this to you in a previous conversation.
Yes.
Now, I have a favourite.
I lost that argument.
Okay. Well, I have a favourite. No, it was an argument that you should fire back at me and say, well, at least you've noticed something. The resort that is one of my favourites in Fiji is the Westin in Denarau. And the Westin I've stayed at since 1975 under other names. It was first called the Regent. But it's a 5-star hotel, a resort, and it's absolutely wonderful. I do a couple of things when I go to the Westin. I love swimming in their pool, several pools, and I love swimming in the ocean, which was just in front of the pool, the bar area. And last time I was there in 2015, I looked out for the beach in front of the pool, and it was gone. The water, and this is your point, Stuart, the water had risen to the point where the beach was then covered in rocks. Right. And that was to support the issue of erosion, so that the rest of the embankment that was up high didn't disappear as well.
Yes.
Now, I'm probably visiting again soon, and the first thing I'm going to do is wander off to the beach to see if it's still there or not. So at this point, Gary, I can't say whether I will support the argument. I just wondered whether the development around Denarau was actually causing the issue, because there have been several major projects. You know, we're talking $100 million resorts being built in there. So there's a lot more people, and that may have had some effect on the water. I don't know. I haven't asked.
Yes. But my point is that as serious as it is with water levels rising, that is more of a nuisance than the real danger of global warming. So even though we might lose our shoreline, or it might be altered, or it might stay the same, depending on how deep the water is, depending on the structure of the water underneath the water, depending on a lot of factors. The real danger, seems to me, is how do we prevent a world from continuing to warm? We don't have the resources to cool our planet down.
This concludes the first section of the debate, and unfortunately, Mr. Schofield is correct. We don't have a method with which to cool our planet down. It ends on a rather sad and glum note, but it picks up next week. There are many interesting topics brought up in this section, one of which was, who benefits from global warming? Do climate scientists? Do oil or petroleum companies? I personally believe that skepticism is the foundation of science in all aspects. It is wonderful if people are skeptical and don't believe everything they hear. Rather, one should examine a wide variety of information from all aspects and all places, and the truth will be somewhere in the middle. But in terms of who benefits from global warming, climate scientists don't necessarily benefit, whereas petrol and companies of the like benefit hugely by perpetrating climate change as not happening or as a hoax. An interesting topic Gordon brought up was who benefits from worldwide disasters such as Y2K or the avian bird flu. In those instances, there were clear winners. But who benefits from climate change being a hoax? Skepticism is very important and essential for science to exist. Being skeptical is what makes science both plausible and possible. Science is all about being skeptical. It's about replication and peer-reviewed data. All these things make science objective and independent. And I think Gary Schofield is right in terms of what does the data show? Skepticism on this topic is, in my opinion, different because it is a topic where all of the data conclusively falls on one side. The planet is heating up, and we don't have a way to stop it. Tune in next week for the second section of this interview. In the meantime, thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of your day. If you have any questions you would like answered on this show about global warming, feel free to email globalwarning89.0@gmail.com. That's global warning with an N, 89.0@gmail.com. And if you would like to hear other great content or listen to this interview again, feel free to visit accessradio.org. Again, that is accessradio.org. And now here's a song called The Snow is Melting for Christmas, written by the very same Mr. Schofield that was here today. Enjoy!
The snow is melting for Christmas, and all of the white is shedding a glistening tear, clear as albedo glare. Where are our three wise men? And what if we worship the earth a little more, but realize that it is you and all of the things that you do? What values can there be if there isn't a world left to see? We love our children too, so work to make them see that all of the hopes, all of the dreams, all we create, all of our fate, the wisdom, the compassion, the drama, sacrifice, the human verse would be lost in a dispassionate universe, and will mean nothing if we are left without a world.